as the Upasaka vow. And the lay vows have 5 things that one refrains from. And these are one refrains from taking life, one refrains from taking that which is not given, and one refrains from sexual misconduct, wrong speech, and intoxicating drink and drugs. So these are the 5 things one refrains from when one takes the lay vows.
So a question around that. The person that takes refuge, the lay vows, they don't drink and take drugs. All right. I know many people that don't do it.
Okay, but the point is being made here. Kishima says that it's not necessary to. There is 2 ways one begins to approach these vows, wherein like some people adhere to one, refraining from one of these things, such as taking life, or 2 of these things, such as taking life and wrong speech, and in that manner. And if you can, then all 5 of them.
Okay.
So these are, just to be clear, I repeat it again: taking life, taking that which is not given, sexual misconduct, wrong speech, and intoxicating drink and drugs.
And taking refuge is not the same as getting.
Of course not. Taking refuge is a prerequisite to.
It's the same though, right? When you take refuge.
No.
Isn't it the same vows?
When you take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
I see.
So,
and the 5 precepts.
Tini nazo chamdruk iji domba rojida. Tina le thagarang marves socho pongada dizo. Timara. Not exactly the same. No.
I think what he means, I think I'm the same. When someone decides to become a Buddhist, so they call it take refuge, and they take those vows.
No.
Or at least some. What I know in the West, from friends who've done it, that's what I know.
So, ta nazo nangla inde mara chamdru kelen sanasra. Chamdru ki thomba len sana ani tagas de thandasan nazo gingi ki thomba nga bojida. Di inji minji lengoya doji chagyo maras. So in the Tibetan tradition, this is not the case. Like when you take refuge, that's a separate vow. And when you take the lay vows, the Upasaka vows, then it's a separate vow.
Refraining from any non-virtues.
It's similar, very similar, no? The 10 non-virtues.
Yeah.
Kisi chamdula juna migi ochu del pongore la ita sheye ma.
Tanda sheye ma. Ina tanda gini la chana ki tso shida. Tanda kuna tila dun haji gini de ni kita. Gini ki domba la hange gini la na kashi sumtu wachira. Peshe gini, nangzo gini, sanju gini, degi gini mongda. Soso ta tanda la ta santu ra. Shimba de shanchi simbe domba da dozi jiba ma ni. De shanchi simbe domba da sui na gini domba ma ne ra. Ine tanda gini ki domba la te di domba gini ki domba lewa ina jini ki nga jada len bo ma. Da ine gini ki domba su sama len bo ma jai ma ra. De tu ma da kashi ra. Beto ko chazane ni kashi chigne ni.
So yes, even within the context of taking the lay vows, then there are many different ways in one begins to approach these vows. Some observe one of these vows, which is not taking life, and then 2, some 3, some the whole, all of these. So if you, so then when we think about the refuge vows and the lay vows, then the refuge vows are a prerequisite to take the lay vows. And the refuge vow anyone can take, but the lay vows not everyone can take. The lay vows can only be taken by people who have taken refuge beforehand.
Is there like a time limit for how do they determine? Like I could take the refuge and then go to a teacher for a while, or what is that look?
Divarala tuzido jikshawa esra. Tambo chamdole ni dijela ni tanda sotarki di karsa gini tombale tuzido tomba shawa. So it's not necessary to there to be a time period wherein like you can immediately take the refuge vows, then take the lay vows.
지단이 얘기가 동발내와 지단처럼 손대 오라. 동발내는 게 제체라. 지단이 다른 저는 소제로도 지금 달롱도 더 간치라. 그래서 저도 그냥 구형보다 옛날 투버들에 맞고 얼마나 투버디도 발내셔는 이게 제체라.
So then, even though like we somehow adhere to a sense of morality which is informed by the same things in the vows, then the purpose of taking a vow is much more profound, wherein like if we take that vow, then we do not ever give ourselves a chance to like mindlessly engage in this acts by mistake. So then the root virtue of taking these vows themselves are very profound. And you are very open-minded people, the Western people in general. So then it's not necessary you have to take the five whole, all of these, you have to adhere to all of these five things. You can think about what you want to adhere from, what you want to refrain from, such as killing life, taking life, taking what's not given to you. So anything that you want to out of this five, you can take a vow to not to engage in this. So then we will now continue with the root text itself, and we have.
So what does it actually mean to take refuge?
되니 점조를 접수 도와야 되게 니 된다고 가르쳐야 그랬어.
접수 도와야 코아다 예술이. 코아다 예술은 지시들 접는거 고주선 내용이 불러서 거라. 텔레 접수 되는 거라. 나는 가서 치대시면 되는 이제 따라시에 되게.
So then taking refuge means that you had a sense of dissatisfaction with samsara itself, and you have a fear of being in the lower realms too. So from that fear of samsaric dissatisfaction, then you go for refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. This is what it means. So not in the general sense of the word fear of samsaric existence itself. So then, if you take refuge, then you build on that to develop a true sense of renunciation. 니중지에라 다 잠조되기 펜션을 토요라. 가시기라나 다 당분 니중 템포지면은 잠조지 갖고 잠조를 족하고 버리려 되는 시기다.
인본주의 좀 스타일이라. 제 보다 인본만 주는 그 딜레 저 뭐야 그거도 통 말아. 근데 민주라에 대해서 지타바다 반지문 줘야 되고 그만으로 쳐도. 능이면 인주면 다들 그렇지 말아.
So then, in order to take refuge, it's important to understand what do we mean by renunciation, and what is the purpose of renunciation. Because without a sense of renunciation of samsaric existence, then one cannot really begin to think about liberation at all. So it's important to contemplate on true renunciation first, and then think about taking refuge in the three jewels.
What do you mean by renunciation? Like when you are like don't like the samsaric or
Yes.
don't agree with whatever is happening.
That ultimately everything in samsara is impermanent, and ultimately anything in samsara cannot offer you a fulfillment or a sense of true satisfaction or joy. Now we are discussing more about Vinaya, the ethics or the code of conduct. In the previous sessions, we were having a spiritual exchange of traditions and so forth. Now we are discussing about ethics, morality, and so forth.
Lama laboji manani ga na shu da ne ne 대지 칼로다 수도 된 것다 와서라 아니 동배 동부들라는
Okay. Then the 22nd verse, according to the ritual described in the discipline chapter of the Bodhisattva levels, you should take the vow from a good, authentically qualified spiritual teacher. So you cannot begin to take vow from any person. It should be from a spiritual teacher who embodies all the perfect qualities. So the vow cannot be taken from anyone. So it comes from the textual source, the Bodhisattva levels. It's the ground and path. It describes the ground and path along the practice. And from that text, in the discipline chapter, it makes the point that it's important to take the vow. It is necessary to take the vow from a spiritual teacher who embodies all the perfect qualities, not from anyone.
아니 다니 간식 동라 내리 안 수수 동바양다 왔으니 라 수수그 로 동바기 데 로라니 수수그 동바야 뭐 마선 밀라 나나 펜도르스나 아니 동바 보즈 동바 나 투게 that's today 나 투게 대자는 맞이야 동바 나 바지 뭐 페이스 숨제라 나사들 인제데 바 인제와 건트라 근데 라마 잠보 시바차 근데 지라 네 라마 잠보라 와레스라.
So then moving on, understand that a good spiritual teacher is one skilled in the vow ritual, who lives by the vow and possesses the patience and compassion to bestow it. So then in the previous verse we talked about how it is necessary for us to take the vows from a spiritual teacher who embodies all these perfect qualities. So then what exactly are the qualities that such a spiritual teacher should embody? At the least, it is said that the teacher should be skilled in the vow ritual itself. Now, some say that the teacher who is giving the vow must be able to recite the vow prayers and the vow initiation by memory. This is a minimum requirement that a teacher must be able to do it. And then, not only that, now he or she must adhere by these vows themselves, and they must have received and they must have possessed these vows. And then not only that, they must have the patience and compassion to actually give you, bestow these vows to you. Yes. So then this is the importance of not just getting caught up in a moment of inspiration and beginning to take vows from anyone whosoever. It's important to know that you can only take the vow from a spiritual teacher who has these qualities themselves.
Are you attached to this teacher in some way as you embark on your journey officially in Buddhism?
저는 기겐다 단다 노만한게 기겐 줘라. 딜라 아니다 그냥 대화 사고지 차이로 왔어. 대화 사고 딜라 that attached in the sense not in attachment, but does it mean
the wrong word. I guess in Hinduism you have this guru-student relationship.
Yes.
Does it have any such connotations?
Yes. Now it goes on to talk about that.
Oh, right, okay.
기 신이 된 수디다 나서 사실 못 지기라. 거의 다른 티어라. 아니 힌두 기초는 아니 신이 된 수디야 사실 못 지기라서. 디 로마다 구루 첼라는 사실 못 지기라서. 디나시니 라마다 로마라서 뭐 덤지 때 보고요 봐. 어디 시기라서. 디바 덤지 때 보고 걸어야 돼. 시셔나 지기라. So yes, in that relation between the guru and the student, between the spiritual teacher and the student, there shouldn't be any sort of suspicion. It should be a relationship of complete trust between each other.
땅이 동바랑 되게는 바나서도 소소히 같이 대바다 이치도 성요고 나도 가지고 있는 산지연 동네 그렇지는 아니 디바 개와사일에 디바 쳇들
So then, this is why it says it's important to know that these are the qualities that a spiritual teacher must embody before you begin to take this vow from anyone. So sometimes people take these vows and then after that begin to criticize their teachers. This is not the approach. One should, before taking this vow, know this. These are the qualities that a spiritual teacher must possess.
Can one take those vows but not necessarily identify as a Buddhist?
This is difficult, I think. But the sodargi nga zo tomba jora ta gingi. Di lena ni nga namba mailam namba mai nerwa. Ni sodargi da gingi tomba de jora. Dizu lena ni digures.
너무 많이 내. 뜻들이
Digra.
그거 까고 너무 많이 내. 이게 어디 까도라.
So then, yeah, it doesn't really matter because it stops one from engaging in negative actions. So it serves a purpose, even if you begin to identify yourself as Buddhist or not Buddhist.
그다음에 남바임에 건조 소점에 하다 개념을 따고.
Rere.
그 넘버선으로 따고 맞네. 건조 소점에 하다.
So then the criteria on which one can begin to identify as Buddhist or not Buddhist is on the basis of taking refuge. The other vows, then if these appeal to you, even if you're not a Buddhist, you can begin to adhere by these vows.
그때도 너무 많이 해. 힌두도 이제 자갈에 도 보이서.
Nale.
무슨 말이야? 그래.
Kashingamishi.
그지 이제 그런데 양담도 윤내로 되게 이거지를 칼라마사야도
So now, then not just Buddhist, I think even in the Hindu context, there are many vows that one can take, even if one is not Hindu or one does not identify as Hindu. Because when you go to temples, you begin to fast and so forth. Like retreats, one-day retreats wherein you fast, you stay in silence. So yeah.
It's written here that the teacher should have possess the patience and compassion to do that. Like, what's the process of taking the vow, and is it like a longer relationship with, like, connection with the teacher? Like, is it little idea, like a brief?
You mean the actual ritual process itself, or the relationship between the teacher who bestows the vow and the student who receives it?
Both.
Both. Okay. Tene nazo tanda tombannawe ni jurimro jera. Di tiduzamba ni tanda nazo ta dela ni soba da nyinji chenji gore ran sora. Ti sonde zamba ni tanda nazo tombannawe jurim dela sra. Ni jurim di tuzurim bu yorves. Tombannawe gi nazo ta chogaro jera. Di maina ani gigendi danda lobru jera. Dini korangi damzi tempo yego na the Jawada, the Jurumbuchi negative candidates.
말이디 그 남다 그 dombalese 미데 하고 그라 근데지미라 가지만이 미지둘라 남자 아사체라 이 사람 남자인데 지게 말이다 지게 라마르라 데카다만 주마지마르나 카다 근데도 치다 근데도 라마데 근데도 그 최신이 근데도 참아야 보지다니 아니 지고 가서디나 빼셔코라는 소리라 신이 챙이 지대라야더라 신이 도와쇼와 니쇼와 아 가서야 된다봐 저제 눈기 축배 근데 뭐 보여요 지난데 됐다고 그러지 뭐 보여 자 세상에서 가지고 있는 남자 땡치 주려면 땡 차는 아기 소소리 다 약전 통나야 돼 뭐 다시 지고라 그러든 다 전통선에 이 카드 난 디바마 사이에라 담보는 소소 좀 붙여 뺏기지
So then the actual ritual is not that long. The ritual process is not that long. It's a short ritual. But now once you have taken such a vow from such a spiritual teacher, then the relationship should be one of complete trust and devotion. And so it's important to kind of carry a process of investigation before you receive these vows from a particular teacher. Know the teacher who you are taking these vows from. And nowadays, many people make the mistake because this process and these things sound very novel to them, new to them, and then they develop strong sense of inspiration in one moment, and then begin to take vows from anyone whosoever without carrying on this process of investigation, checking the qualities of a spiritual teacher. And then after a while, then they begin to criticize their own teacher. This is not the advised approach. When we look at the text themselves, it talks about how one should look at the 17 qualities of a spiritual teacher. So if they embody all of these perfect qualities, then one can take the spiritual vows from these teachers. Otherwise, one should not take these vows in one moment of inspiration just because you want to.
I'm curious, what is that relationship like? How often do they talk? Do they do pujas together? What's that relationship like?
Dini para la dewa jiras, ta kande do iras, Qurani yang do tu de iras ra, yang gijero shegi iras ra, Qurani nyam do chabada ani shabden rimba do nyam do tubyo ra kande iras ta.
당도 단도 더라데 식사기 세미자 데자칠 되어 마카도 야도 만도도 당이마 베로지는 사치질 라마지 버데 슈데 근데 메만 그 너무 통하대 근데 간데 그 제바 간데 시바 간데 자치 정말 따고 다다다 협도 사실 마시마도 시마시 치시 따는 시라 이런 말 따이네 키는 괜히 이거 지미지 남자 마마데 라 치시를 되거다 라 라마라마 되지 아니 그 따지 지기 전에
So then, in the traditional setup, in Tibet, people didn't really move about too much. There was one Lama who was in a particular town, and he stays there. So people who take these vows from him, they know him on a daily basis. So then the Lama guides them throughout their lives. But nowadays, this is not the case. People have to move about, travel about for studies, business, whatever. So then that relationship in the traditional sense does not survive. And then maybe they talk over years when they can. But traditionally, that is the relationship between the one who confers such a vow. And so in this day and age, it's better not to take the vow immediately. It's better to study, contemplate on your own these teachings. And then if you really feel like, okay, this makes sense, I want to take this vow, then look for a particular teacher who embodies all these qualities, and then take the vow. So then this is the reason why I stress the importance of the recognition that we are all spiritual friends, rather than the relationship dynamic between a teacher and a student. Because I don't want to give you the impression that I'm a spiritual teacher, you're a student. Then you develop this wrong impression that now that I've received these teachings, then I should look at him or her as a spiritual teacher. This is why I always make the point that we are all spiritual friends. So in that way, we are discussing things rather than in that traditional dynamic of spiritual teachers and students.
I have two questions regarding Kenyan vows without refuge. Does one with Kenyan vows without refuge qualify fully as upasika? Second is dilemma regarding the teacher relationship, the teacher-student relationship. Because if a teacher is a Buddhist and teaches Buddhist and advises Buddhist things, and one does not take refuge, but does this present any challenge?
Not particularly. That the Tiwanidura, Gini Domba Shujuras, Jamdu and Majumune, and Gini Domba Shunasra, and the Gini Domba Tsuda de Machagi Ares, and Nibasra. 아니 라마다 기긴데기 아니 낭추고로 송주남 기어was 드니 아니 롭투디기 아니 낭추고로 고기어was Ti koyon de zamba ani gigin da lopchu gi para de lasra. Anzo namchun na shingi de sugi tatsu jiora. Ti ani madum na ya ani chen yo marwes chushu de zamba. Ti da yo mara.
또 소를 땅도 손대 받아. 괜히 주된리에 차장지 예킨 철철에
Yo mara.
담보 소를 때 받아나 쉬우니까 샤자 아니 저일라마지 있잖아. 근데 바켈레로 수 담대셔 제일 카로 땅은 좀 담보 소도 받쳐서 제가 저 신이를 따라야죠. 말로 기계 마다야 될도 야다야. 그래. 대상 딱딱 러시도. 근데 지금 전도가 제발 맞으니까 제일 때서 말이 갔다 이제 야. 담보 가리는 지난 내가 가리는 인디와 개인시키만 내가 가리 맞으니까 따지게 디체는 가능해서 풀을 가능한다. 야부는 지게라. 그래서 지금 좀 싸우잖아요. 담보 남자로 지 자생만 그 김에 가도 근데 자야 가지고 뭐도 자는 편도 가도 근데 스스로 거기를 따라. 어디는 제 지워 나 시기다 직추 남으로 내가이나 테스트하지 지고야 되게 지고라.
So then with anything that we undertake in our life, if we do not carry a process of investigation before, then sometimes it does not serve us well. So likewise, Buddhism always gives you that space and opportunity to not accept the teachings at face value, or not to enter into a teacher-student relationship immediately. You can always attend Buddhist teachings without looking at the person who is imparting these teachings as a spiritual teacher, because you are afforded that space and opportunity to investigate whether the teachings appeal to you, make sense to you, whether the teacher, whether the teacher as a spiritual teacher appeals to you, whether they meet the necessary requirements. So it's always important to investigate before jumping into taking someone as a teacher, or before jumping in to take these vows. This is a big mistake most people make in this day and age. When they attend teachings, then they immediately look at the teacher as a spiritual teacher, without carrying on the due process of investigation. Traditionally, you always carry the due process of investigation before taking someone on as your spiritual teacher. And likewise, the teacher himself looks at the student and carries on a process of investigation wherein he determines if the student is suitable to receive these teachings or not. Genyendi genyi domba suda demba chichagir ves nangbagi chamro la majugna.
제 하우스 된지.
Tati
그디 컬러도 그
genyi
이 더밤.
chamro kemalinas number igyo marada. Ani genyi domba le.
아니 네가 나는 저기 이 더만나 레디들 나바 이거 시작하지고 이게 더 못해요. 이게 싫어하면 돼. 싫지.
So then generally the way that the lay vows are given is with the assumption that they have already taken the refuge vows. So generally they are Buddhists themselves. But then if you don't want to identify as a Buddhist, then it doesn't really matter, because you don't want that kind of, whether it qualifies as upasaka or lay vows, it doesn't really have any meaning to you. It only has a meaning to the Buddhists.
근데 팀에도 이게 더 멋있네.
I was thinking more for four sanghas, which are necessary for preservation of dharma. So are these people upasikas or not?
Are part of the spiritual community. Ta konzo ani gindu gi dela tsugires. Gini gi tomba chamdol matui de gini tomba tsug.
얘도 책을
Mare karsa tanda manzo gini gi tomba chamdol malini gini gi tomba le nyejora. Dini manzo gindu gi deora. Gindu gi dela tsugires. Tida tsug mara.
세마이겠네. 그 제tempo 알레 맞아 테스트하고.
Then I think you need to kind of build the foundational understanding a little bit. First, when we talk about spiritual community, then the spiritual community themselves have taken refuge. This is a prerequisite to be a part of the Sangha. So then...
나가서 내가 추루를 되게 내가 상가 이미지 그걸 보고 지금 났을 때. 이 추루 상가 장만은 상가에 있는 게츠로 되니 내 샤워도 내가 추루를 되게 가서 상가를 같이 하게 돼.
나서에 긴드 되는 수기 말아 나서 미자라. 되게 수기 말아. So then when we say spiritual friends, then we mean it in this context, not in the classical context of Sangha or the spiritual community itself. For example, I would not be considered a part of the Sangha because I'm a layperson. So if you want to be a part of the Sangha, then you have to be an ordained. And then when you begin to define a Sangha, then for a community to be considered a Sangha, then you need at least 4 people with full ordinations. These are the strict.
Sometimes it's people equalize or
Yeah, this is a good question. Yeah. So now it's clear, in the traditional classical understanding of the Sangha and its implication, then we do not mean it in that context. We mean it as spiritual friends in this context. So then it's very important to familiarize ourselves with since you have taken the vows yourself and you are an ordained persons, it's important to familiarize oneself with the way that the Vinaya describes the Sangha, and the Vinaya describes this. So it's important to kind of keep revisiting the Vinaya again and again. Ambaraja di tanda chizun jambeyangi chubado chiredago. Ambaraja chuba yisa chidar shanchu teji bata ambaraja la ji so digi kan shanchu tu chira jira korang ta ji tombal ta neda lo jimro ta ta hamdra semji da chi jambe chinis karsa jambe chinis sanje chinis jenjin do le shepa tar ta do de jen de zo le sra do na lo shepa na shen teshen de ni repse je la ta ko ta na se ta do de me je de na se ko tiki ni la sra ta ine nge te do de je de khare re ka chi la na ma ta ta mo mo la se ta dine ma ganga thagaram re to de ge ne ni ma ambaraja la ya digira giveshi ni da seda de ma de su chi ya ma ta din ma je ni shi da. Okay, then moving on. 24th verse. In case after searching for someone like this, you are unable to find such a spiritual teacher, I shall explain another ritual with which to properly take the vow. With utmost clarity, I shall write how long ago, when he was Ambaraja, Manjushri generated bodhicitta as described in the ornament of Manjushri's Buddha Field Sutra. So in case you fail to find such a spiritual teacher who embodies all these qualities and to confer you these vows, then Adisha says that he will give you another ritual. He will tell you another ritual from which you can generate the body. You can generate bodhicitta and take the bodhicitta vows for oneself. So So the source of such a ritual is the ornament of Manjushri's Buddha Field Sutra. And Ambaraja, a manifestation of Manjushri, was able to generate bodhicitta within himself in such a manner, without depending on a spiritual teacher. That's it. So then it cites the ornament of Manjushri's Buddha field from here on. So the ritual through which one can take the Bodhisattva vow without depending on the teacher is in this manner. In the presence of the protectors, I generate the mind of perfect enlightenment and then invite all beings as my guest. These I shall liberate from samsara. So it's a process of visualization first. You visualize that all the Buddhas of all the times are in front of you, and then you generate that aspiration to achieve perfect enlightenment. And then you invite all sentient beings as your guest, and then you develop the wish to liberate all of them from samsara itself. And now as the text itself reveals these things, then I cannot avoid talking about vows. But generally I am very reluctant to talk about vows in this context, because the vows should be talked about in their proper context and in the proper in their proper context. So now that when the text itself begins to talk about the vows, so I feel that I cannot avoid it at this point. Yes. So then 27th, the 27th verse, from this moment until I achieve supreme enlightenment, I shall have no thoughts of harm, no anger, no avarice or jealousy. So then, as we already talked about the altruistic intention to achieve liberation for all sentient beings, then when you look at this kind of vow that one takes in the generation of such an altruistic intention, then think about the consequence of this vows, saying that I will have no thoughts of harm, no anger, no sense of jealousy towards anyone. Then can we really begin to do this immediately? When we look at ourselves and the way that we react to things, so then it's not an easy thing to achieve. So we need to realize this when we're talking about vows and all these things. Les.
Chibures, Tati, Tanda Governor, Sanchik Mata di Parasus in the Senate, the Tato, and the Tachi, to Zumijiba, Magic Gosai, Suzuki Chibuache, Tadi and him, Samba Chibala, Tata Gilasaji, Tomatama Lacona, Digitan, Lacona, which Queda Dua, Takanda Suzuki, Domatama Jilra, Samba Chula, Chiba, that is also the announced Chiba, the Kodra, a Cheshin, and dig down the Pampa, and the Bapampa, and the Bada, the Mamata, and the Ra, the power chas like that. And it's too Tombala lager ways. Then they and running Suyanta Suni, Suegi, and Tombala, Toa, Gaway again. Gaway, and Sanji is a laber chas. Then they get that's so the Basu, Dorijibu, my bagage and Troshin, Ra, and Sanji is Sanji Sumata, Nyan.
Then 28, I shall cultivate pure conduct and abandon sin and craving. With joy for the vows of discipline, I shall train to emulate the Buddhas. So then one takes the vow not to give in to craving, not to give in to the afflictions, and to engage in negative actions. And then you develop a sense of joy to adhere to the vows of disciplines in an effort to emulate the Buddhas themselves. So then when we think of discipline and code of conduct, then we have a sense that we are kind of bearing through things. Like I'm bearing through these things. But when you take this vows, then it should be informed by a sense of joy to adhere to these vows of discipline. Yes. Das ist auch sang ma je bodura joachi jamale ba ni sangje wala joachi jamale ba sangi sal ko gi la jira tiri joshi
Shimi Muta never G's. The Handy draws some gentlemen, some magic body, and this child and tell us to little with
So then, taking no joy in swiftly attaining enlightenment for myself, I will remain until the very end, for the sake of even a single being. So this is the scope of the Bodhisattva vow, wherein you do not look to gain liberation and enlightenment only for yourself. You make the promise that even if there is a single sentient being left in samsara, then you will remain in samsara to elevate them from their suffering and put them in a place to achieve liberation and enlightenment themselves. Is it difficult?
Yes. No.
Difficult? Yes, no?
How to do it?
No, to kind of process it, understand it.
So the Bodhisattva 29, taking no joy in swiftly attaining enlightenment for myself. So we are delaying the enlightenment because we are not enlightened, but I'm delaying my own enlightenment so that I could help people first.
Not exactly. You achieve enlightenment yourself, but then you choose to come back into samsara to help sentient beings.
As an enlightened being.
Yes. Tanda kunzu tiwa di tigida chanchu simba laya dige ni sang ge di patha rindu chiryang do chinera. Dwa sama sang jeje budu susu dila di dila ya mara. Susu sang koban tomna ya kowa la ni ha goshin do ma yo simje chintu di chi la yo.
Sanshi di siba lebe koala ra. Korante koala kowa mata, kwe di ngeyo mara. Ne simjengi tundu mali ne.
Yes. So it's not a delayed process. You achieve enlightenment yourself and then you choose to come back to samsara to help sentient beings. Questions at this point? That one's a Hansa is the day in the day or someone else.
Chidangi shanchi ku senchina le ya ane mambu tanga. Chidiga le senchina le jivu tabu senchi le. Ra luzu tabu senchi ya le kata. Nyemba tabu senchi le. Sunyu ra. Chida jivu tabu senchi le di. Tabu sa jendru la umra. Ra. Jivu tabu senchi le di. Tate luzu tabu senchi. Luzu tabu 루즈 때문에 심지에 가서나 슈즈 때문에 심지래다. 심지에 당장 내가 사지. 아니란 지지 제우사에 좀 그런 데 있지. 단 nhiệm 받다 보다 지단이로 그래. 지단이 그 냠도 열어.
냠도
그래. 그러고 냠도 코라이 냠도 우리 사지에게 강서 심버지 냠도. 예부터 무슨 집이
라마기.
나랑이 사지 차비 아니 셔라 맞는데. 되게 싫어. 소리라.
So then the actual in the actual process of generating bodhicitta and becoming a bodhisattva, then the means through which one begins to engage in bodhisattva activities are explained in this manner. Some assume the means that a king approaches his subject. Some engage in acts which assume the relationship between a shepherd and his goats or sheep. Some assumes the relationship between a captain of a ship and his crewmates. So in that relation, then it's different. In the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep, then he lets the sheep go first, then he himself follows later on. Then in the relationship of the captain and the crew of a ship, then they go together. Then in the relationship between the king and his subjects, then one achieves enlightenment first, and then begins to help sentient beings. So yeah, there are many different ways in which one engages in this bodhisattva acts.
And just to clarify, this is very unique to the Mahayana tradition, right? Including like the refuge and...
Not the refuge.
Okay.
The bodhicitta.
The bodhicitta in particular. The bodhicitta vows. Okay.
Is the door through which one enters the Mahayana practice.
Okay.
But refuge is common through all the three vehicles. Gengin too, yeah. The lay vows too.
The lay vows too.
Only bodhicitta. 나가서 택진기 남나 슈게라 투무 많이 받이다 데 전주쌤들아. 진짜 전부 다 갱이 동발해야 돼서다 대화 대매 벌써 숨잘해야 돼.
just 단다가 근데 신체단이 숨다. 그래서 간로지인데 저거다.
So okay, let's loosen up a little bit now. So when we talk about these three types of bodhisattvas who assume the relationship between a king and a subject, shepherd and his sheep, captain and his crewmates, what will the approach that you would take if you become a bodhisattva? It's important to think about these things. What would you do? Shepherd? The Luxido Chigis. I like the captain and the crew. Other the Trudangijura or the
I like that one too.
so you can curse.
I'll join your ship.
I see you. The Toromoru Doshe or Nyamduruna. Chiboy, Nyamdu Nyangara. The Koi Nayam the Tawa Timidus. The thing as you two in the single.
가정가 도지되는 내 거라들이 봐. 당하지나 멀리서네. 멀리서 뜻까지 가서 내가 거라들이 봐. 거라들이 얘기도 내 개인도 직접 가면. 내가도 나도 뭐마다 그냥 그렇게 싶다. 다지글은 로드도 지금 뭐 로드. 다지 당하서 로드사. 당번에 얘기를 지제도 제용을 딱 가다보는 당하서 거라들 처음 없어. 당번에 사진도 여기 지제도 재미도
So then this reminds me of an incident that happened to me when I was in Bodh Gaya and I was performing the mandala offerings. And then as I was done with the rituals, then I took a circumambulation around the stupa And in front of me, two monks were walking, and they were from Tehor, Kham, Eastern Tibet, and they were talking in their dialect, which I understand. And then one person was saying that, okay, he meant like, let's just go now. Let's go home from this stupa. Then the other one, he said that if you leave right now, then if you reach up there, then there wouldn't be much to do up there, you know. So he was saying that if you leave samsara right now and reach enlightenment, there's not much to do up there. You might have to come back again.
There's some action.
그니까 내가 싫지라. 당연히 내가 거라된 사제로 그래도. 다들 시간이 사제는 조금씩 내가 같이 해야 돼. 애기들이 지제도 제가
So he was saying that if you keep taking rounds and rounds, we might get enlightenment. So if you reach enlightenment, there's not much up to do there.
Why there's not?
What?
Why there's not much to do there?
No, they were joking. You know?
There's not much happening over there.
They're all bodhisattvas, so what's the action?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, there's much happening here.
내가 거기서 디스레스 거든.
Seriously, 가르쳐서 가르치자 돼.
Oh yeah, it's boring up there.
Yeah.
Actually, in relation to that, I have a question. So someone that becomes a Buddha, they don't have to come back. So what's happening either?
네 상지나스라 가시니 소설기 상지들 되어라다. 가르쳐들 소설을 라산지기 상지 고원토주로 되어라서. 대조다 비겔 상지천나니 상지 신감도라 이러면서. 진짜질런내는 뭐도 가르치는 되게 어렸다. 군소여라.
세르나 사제라 사제만.
요말에.
사제입니다. 사제. 세르나 사제 단단하게 내거지라. 그러나 사제가 뒤집고 되는 사제군데 말해서 세네 말해.
So
유튜브
then,
라지 티칭이다. 유튜브 라지 티칭 라는 실이야. 사제라서 라마서 덴도고 뭐. 란 사제가 쓰는 말.
데도 타르바 톱섬스라.
타바타도
So then, these solitary realizers, as we call it, who are only informed by the motivation to achieve liberation for themselves, they are not called enlightened beings in the strictest sense of the terms. They have just achieved liberation for themselves, and so they are not completely enlightened beings. So, in what?
Nirvana?
Nirvana is liberation.
Yeah. Did they achieve nirvana?
Yeah, they achieve nirvana, which is liberation, but not complete and perfect enlightenment. So there is a process they have to follow to walk the 10 grounds, the paths, in order to achieve.
니르바나는 사제를 집은 말아. 유튜브 니르바나요. 아직 사제. 니르바나는 집에 뒤집어 말아. 유튜브 다 봐. 아직 다 봐. 대칭이 다 봐.
So in the context of the three kind of individuals who reach liberation, one from the practice of the hearers, one from the solitary realizers, and one from the Mahayana vehicle. So the liberation in each context is very different, and enlightenment is only completed and perfected at the point when you enter the Mahayana path.
What happens if they choose not to come back to samsara?
딱 근수 말로용 말와서 아니 계시 상지 가시 마 코안을 너무 많이 났으라 가르치기 그랬다.
어제 뭐다.
Let's call them.
그다음에 딱 가서 통화만 하는데 때때만 페라. 그다음에 강이 치사질 막 준비해 왔더라. 같이 삼바다 같이 따다 풍부했다. 강이 치사질 준비만 페라 보라. 맨날 따다가 산데 그들로는 당아서 그걸 따다가 나베 따다지다. 그런데 내 마사지 사진 페이지로 있어 줘라. 아니 들으라.
So then, when one becomes a Buddha in the complete and perfect sense of the word, then they come back. But it's just that due to the way that we perceived reality, we do not really see these things, them coming to apparent reality, to samsara, to benefit sentient beings. Some say that these Buddhas, they take the form of a bridge where there is no bridge, a physical bridge where there is no bridge. So wherever there are sentient beings who can
There's a tea to the Nani They do what they are.
So then there are many prophecies in some sutras. Die kan det smule, Ishiki Sula.
Mani Jesus shin like that. It's too much in the team. Takaji to not allow Jesus in the Samba in the Katichi water.
So in the sutras they say that if it helps sentient beings, then all the causes and conditions are perfect. Then I will come in the form of wisdom itself. I will come in the form of a physical bridge itself. So anything that serves sentient beings, when the causes and conditions are right, then they will take that form. So then the session in the morning tomorrow, maybe we approach it a little bit differently. So I want all of you to kind of write down and summarize what are you going to take away from these teachings, to do a summary of what you picked up so far, and then we share it in the class. I think it will help. It will be helpful for everyone. If we have missed some points, then others can remind us, and if we ourselves have missed some points, then others can remind us of the same. So
today's all the classes.
All the classes. So this is good, I think. Even if we have taken a lot of notes, it's important to kind of summarize these notes too. So we have something concrete we can take away from here. Otherwise, we engage in all these teachings and then you forget. Then it's not so effective. So in this now approaching 15 days, then you will get the impression that you really received quite a lot of information, quite a lot of teachings on these topics. And now it's important to kind of summarize this and realize that it's a very small thing, but this small thing could act as a key for you to approach different teachings, and then it will help you to unlock the meaning of different texts in Buddhism that you might approach later on. They will have more clarity. The meanings will make sense to you, the teachings. So this is why it's important to kind of summarize what you have learned so far. So then please prepare such a summary of your notes and whatever you remember from the sessions, and each person will speak for 7-10 minutes. Yes. Okay, then we break for tea.